Shannon Sharpe is somebody that I brought to ESPN. I haven't seen anything. I don't know anything. I don't even know this person. It's all over the internet. There is no concern about him going to jail.
If you say that one more time, I'm going to choke out of you when I see you.
A brand new lawsuit was just filed in Nevada claiming Sharpe was manipulative and abusive and eventually sexually assaulted a Jane Doe.
See, that's emotion. That's emotion right there. That's emotion right there. Listen, let me tell you something right now. I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that.
He doing that too.
Nobody saw it coming. Not like this. Shannon Sharpe, NFL legend turned television powerhouse, just got slapped with a brutal $50 million lawsuit in Nevada. The allegations? Manipulation, abuse, and a chaotic relationship that ended in disaster. It's not just another scandal. It's a legal grenade tossed straight into the middle of the sports world, and it's threatening to blow up everything. Stephen A. Smith, usually the loudest voice in the room, didn't meet the news with his signature fire. When the cameras rolled, he wasn't yelling, he wasn't laughing, he wasn't even cracking a joke. His voice dropped low, steady, the kind of voice you use when you know the whole world is listening. He didn't defend, he didn't accuse. He said one thing loud and clear: allegations are not convictions, and until the facts come out, due process has to be respected. But if you think that careful statement stopped the storm, think again. Within minutes, social media had exploded. Fans were dissecting every blink, every breath, every half-second pause in Stephen A.'s clip, desperate to know, was he defending Sharpe? Was he distancing himself? Was ESPN about to crack under the pressure? Meanwhile, the lawsuit itself reads like a Hollywood script: dates gone bad, mood swings spiraling out of control, accusations of intimidation behind closed doors. No criminal charges yet, but the money on the line? $50 million. Enough to turn a private disaster into a public bloodbath. And Stephen A. caught right in the middle, because just months ago, he went to war to get Sharpe on First Take. He built him up, stood by him, made him part of the brand. And now, that loyalty might come with a price nobody at ESPN was ready to pay. The lawsuit filed in Nevada paints a messy, uncomfortable picture. Jane Doe, the woman behind the lawsuit, claims that what started as a whirlwind relationship with Sharpe in early 2023 turned into something dark. Lavish dates, emotional roller coasters, sharp mood swings, and finally, incidents that allegedly crossed the line into intimidation. And let's be clear, this isn't a criminal trial. Sharpe isn't facing handcuffs or jail time. This is a civil case, a fight over money and reputations, where the burden of proof isn't beyond a reasonable doubt, it's more likely than not. Translation? Even if no one proves anything in a criminal sense, Sharpe could still lose millions based on what a jury believes is the more believable story. As soon as the lawsuit hit the news, Sharpe's legal team fired back hard. His attorney, Lanny Davis, didn't pull any punches. He called the whole thing a blatant money grab and promised to fight it with everything they've got. The tone was aggressive, the kind of tone that screams, "We're not settling quietly." Meanwhile, inside ESPN, it wasn't business as usual. Crisis mode kicked in. Producers scrambling before sunrise to rework entire shows. Wardrobe advisors wondering if a shirt color could accidentally send the wrong message. Social media editors prepping 5 different contingency posts because no one knew if this was going to blow up bigger by lunchtime. And Shannon Sharpe? Radio silent, except for a quick acknowledgement that yes, the lawsuit demands $50 million, a staggering number. Not just because of what it means for him personally, but because of what it could trigger across the entire network. Stephen A. Smith knows this isn't just another athlete scandal. This is personal. This is business. This is two worlds colliding in real time. Just a few months ago, Sharpe joining First Take was a massive win. The ratings spiked, the buzz came back, and Stephen A. looked like the smartest guy in the building. Now, he's walking a tightrope, trying to stay loyal, trying to stay credible, and trying to keep ESPN from bleeding out millions if sponsors start pulling the plug. And the sponsors are already paying attention. The moment lawsuits get this messy, the sharks start circling. Many brands have pause clauses built into their contracts. Basically, a get-out-of-jail-free card that lets them freeze deals if the talent attached becomes a PR nightmare. And trust me, $50 million lawsuits filed in broad daylight qualify. Behind the scenes, it's tense. The lawyers are lawyering. The PR teams are spinning. The suits upstairs are doing quiet math about how much damage they can absorb before they have to make the ugly phone calls. And then there's the bigger conversation happening outside ESPN's walls. About fame, about power dynamics, about how celebrity status can warp relationship, even when everything looks consensual on the surface. Some people are already taking sides. screaming that Sharpe is being unfairly attacked. Others are convinced there's no smoke without fire. Threads, videos, Twitter spaces, all dissecting every detail, whether verified or not. Stephen A. sees the pile-on happening in real time. He's seen this movie before. Accusations, media explosions, court documents, and public judgment way before a judge ever steps in. That's why he's moving differently. No bombastic rants, no screaming into the camera, just slow, deliberate commentary stressing one thing: let the facts come out first. But whether Stephen A. likes it or not, the court of public opinion has already opened, and it doesn't play by courtroom rules. While Stephen A. treaded carefully on air, off-camera things were anything but calm. Insiders whispered about emergency meetings. Sharpe's legal team wasn't just prepping for court. They were running full crisis management drills behind the scenes. Every appearance, every statement, even every outfit Sharpe wore was now under the microscope. Because one wrong move could flip public perception in a heartbeat. And it wasn't just fans and trolls dissecting his every move. Advertisers were making calls. Contracts worth millions were now hanging by a thread. Some companies had already started quietly exploring exit clauses, trying to figure out how fast they could cut ties if the narrative got any worse. That's the brutal truth about brand loyalty. It disappears the moment scandal costs more than it's worth. Meanwhile, legal analysts were poring over the civil complaint, picking apart every word. The lawsuit detailed dates, gifts, heated arguments, and one allegation that instantly caught fire online. Jane Doe claimed that during one particularly bad fight, a gun was visible while Sharpe allegedly raised his voice and took her phone. No violence was reported, no criminal charges followed. But just the image of a gun in the middle of a domestic argument was enough to make headlines explode. Lawyers immediately pointed out, even if none of it leads to a criminal charge, the optics are devastating. In civil court, you don't have to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. You just have to convince a jury your side is more believable. And emotional imagery, like a gun on the table, sticks. The whispers about possible audio or video recordings coming out only made things worse. Although nothing concrete had surfaced yet, rumors were swirling. Maybe there's tape. Maybe there's texts. Maybe there's a smoking gun buried somewhere that could make this 10 times bigger. Nobody knew for sure, but the possibility alone was enough to keep Sharpe's team awake at night. Feeling the heat, Sharpe made a short public statement defending himself, but kept it tight and controlled. Crisis consultants had clearly told him, say as little as possible, don't feed the fire. The less you say now, the less they have to use against you later. But silence has its own risks, especially when the internet thrives on filling in the blanks. Public fascination with this lawsuit wasn't just about Sharpe and Jane Doe. It was about the entire ecosystem of power, fame, and the darker side of celebrity life. People weren't just asking whether Sharpe was guilty. They were asking what this said about sports media, about celebrity accountability, about how networks handle internal scandals when money is on the line. Stephen A., for his part, tried to walk the tightrope without slipping. He made it clear on air, the justice system needs to run its course. He talked about the importance of fairness, of not rushing to judgment, but he also didn't sugarcoat the seriousness of the allegations. It was a careful dance, one that showed he understood the stakes weren't just about Sharpe. They were about ESPN's reputation, his own credibility, and the future of their flagship show. In a rare behind-the-scenes glimpse, staffers described how tense things had gotten at first take. Normally, mornings were loud, chaotic, filled with jokes and energy. Now, people spoke in hushed tones. Casual debates turned stiff. Makeup artists noticed unopened boxes of sneakers piling up in Sharpe's dressing room. A guy known for flashing his new kicks like trophies now didn't even bother. And then came the money problem. ESPN wasn't just worried about public opinion. They were terrified of sponsor attrition. Big brands that dumped millions into sports segments, brands that paid for airtime around Sharpe's debates, were starting to panic. Some had pause clauses that could immediately freeze campaigns if a host became too controversial. Others had moral clauses, allowing them to pull back if an employee's public image turned radioactive. Executives at ESPN weren't waiting for a verdict. They were already preparing two sets of contingency plans, one if Sharpe rode the storm out, and another if he became untouchable. Producers were quietly developing backup segments that didn't involve Sharpe at all. Ad sales teams were getting grilled by corporate clients demanding updates. It wasn't just Sharpe's career on the line, it was ad revenue, budgets, even staffing numbers. And while all that was happening, the outside world wasn't letting up. Cultural critics, influencers, even former athletes weighed in. Some blasted the system, saying powerful men always get protected. Others warned against trial by media, arguing that public outrage before facts are confirmed destroys reputations unfairly. It was a chaotic flood of opinions, and Stephen A. had to navigate it live every single day. Throughout it all, Stephen A. remained visibly different on air. Normally, he thrived on hot takes and controversy, yelling over co-hosts and delivering viral moments. Now, his tone was more muted, more measured. Every word sounded weighed, like a man carrying the burden of knowing no matter what he said, half the audience would accuse him of bias. Because at the end of the day, this wasn't just about Shannon Sharpe, it was about trust. Trust in the network, trust in the personalities delivering the news, trust that they weren't protecting their own at the expense of the truth. And Stephen A., better than anyone, understood that once trust is lost, you can't just buy it back with ratings. As the days dragged on, the internal pressure at ESPN only got heavier. Behind closed doors, the legal department was on high alert. HR was quietly reviewing company policies around personal conduct and public scandals. Nobody wanted to be the executive who missed a memo or mishandled a landmine. Because if this lawsuit spiraled even further, heads were going to roll, and not just Sharpe's. The lawsuit itself wasn't getting quieter either. In fact, it was getting nastier. The complaint highlighted even more allegations that sent shockwaves through the network, including claims that during heated moments, Sharpe had allegedly crossed boundaries that, even in civil court, looked terrible on paper. No physical assault charges, no police reports, but the words emotional distress and intentional infliction of harm kept echoing across news segments and headlines. And the woman at the center of it all? Jane Doe wasn't giving interviews. She wasn't posting cryptic social media captions or doing press tours. Her silence created a vacuum, and the internet filled it with every rumor imaginable. Some speculated that there were more texts, more DMs, more receipts that hadn't even surfaced yet. Others claimed, without evidence, that the lawsuit was just the beginning and criminal charges might follow. Again, none of that was confirmed. But the speculation was doing almost as much damage as any formal accusation could. On the other side, Shannon Sharpe wasn't staying completely quiet either. He posted alleged private texts from Jane Doe, trying to show the relationship had been consensual and, at times, even encouraged behavior that later turned into accusations. One text in particular blew up online, a graphic, explicit message that Sharpe's defenders said proved Jane Doe wasn't the victim she portrayed herself to be. But this move was risky. Legal experts immediately warned that posting private messages could backfire in court. It could be seen as trying to intimidate or shame the accuser. And in the brutal arena of public opinion, context rarely survives screenshots. Meanwhile, Stephen A. Smith kept threading the needle on air, walking the line between acknowledging the lawsuit's seriousness without rushing to condemn Sharpe. It was a masterclass in media survival, but even he couldn't hide the shift in tone. His debates were sharper, his smiles fewer, his pauses longer. And it wasn't just Stephen A. feeling the strain. The entire First Take team was rattled. Staffers started whispering about upcoming shoots being rescheduled, remote appearances quietly canceled, backup plans quietly drawn in case Sharpe had to step away indefinitely. Nothing official yet, but the tension was thick enough to choke on. Then came the behind-the-scenes war rooms. ESPN execs, PR heads, and lawyers huddling in emergency meetings, playing out every possible scenario. If Sharpe stayed and more evidence dropped, disaster. If Sharpe left and later won in court, embarrassment. Every option was ugly. Every move carried risk. Meanwhile, public fascination with the lawsuit was only growing. Twitter spaces turned into battlegrounds. Reddit threads exploded with theories and timelines. Armchair detectives started cross-referencing Sharpe's social media posts with Jane Doe's claims, trying to find contradictions or confirmations. Some timelines were wildly inaccurate. Others came dangerously close to uncovering real legal vulnerabilities. It became clear that no matter how the actual lawsuit played out, Shannon Sharpe's reputation was already bleeding out in real time, and ESPN's, by extension, was taking shrapnel too. Legal analysts also started focusing on something that scared executives even more: the discovery process. Once discovery kicked in, both sides could subpoena private communication, text messages, emails, travel records, even security footage. It was a phase known for unearthing ugly surprises, especially when powerful people thought private messages would stay private. And the discovery threat wasn't just about Sharpe. If he had discussed anything even remotely problematic with coworkers, producers, or fellow ESPN talent, even jokingly, those conversations could theoretically end up dragged into the courtroom. Every text, every offhand comment, every casual DM. Suddenly, it wasn't just Sharpe at risk. It was anyone who had ever texted him something they wouldn't want read aloud in court. Sharpe's team knew it too. That's why, even with a public denial, there were whispers that settlement talks might eventually happen, not because they admitted guilt, but because discovery was a brutal meat grinder that very few public figures survive without scars. And while all of that legal maneuvering churned behind the scenes, Stephen A. kept showing up, kept anchoring First Take, like the whole ship wasn't creaking under pressure. But viewers noticed the cracks. They noticed the hesitations. They noticed the way even fiery debates about basketball or football seemed less carefree. It was as if everyone on set knew they were sitting under a sword that could drop at any moment. One wrong leak, one viral recording, one damning text, that's all it would take. And somewhere, deep down, Stephen A. Smith knew it too. By now, the lawsuit wasn't just a legal story. It had become a full-blown cultural debate. Talking heads weren't just asking whether Shannon Sharpe was guilty. They were questioning how the media handles accusations against celebrities, how corporations react under pressure, and whether due process even matters once social media picks a villain. Meanwhile, deeper inside ESPN, the fallout was already creeping into every corner. Human resources began quietly reviewing conduct clauses buried deep inside contracts. Legal teams combed through paperwork, prepping for every possibility, from administrative leave to full termination, depending on how bad things got. Nothing had been decided yet, but contingency plans were being updated daily. Stephen A. Smith, always seen as the unshakable face of ESPN, became the reluctant stabilizer. Off camera, he wasn't joking with producers the way he used to. On camera, he wasn't chasing easy viral moments. Instead, he leaned harder into his journalistic roots, slow, methodical, deliberate. It was like he was trying to set an example. We wait for facts. We don't rush to judgment, even if the world around us already has. But waiting came at a cost. Viewers expecting entertainment sometimes felt the shift. The episodes didn't crackle with the same electric chaos. Some accused Stephen A. of being too soft. Others praised him for maturity. Either way, it was clear the show would never be quite the same again. And the discovery phase kept looming larger. Lawyers explained to anyone who would listen, discovery isn't about truth or lies. It's about vulnerabilities. It's about finding that one careless email, that one sloppy text message, that one half joke made in bad taste. Sharpe's team knew they weren't just fighting Jane Doe anymore. They were fighting the digital ghosts of his own private life. Parallel to all this, fans began noticing how the broader sports world was reacting. Former players, once quick to back Sharpe online, started going quiet. Sponsorship mentions around his segments dipped lower. Influencers who built careers off Sharpe's sound bites and memes began shifting focus to other personalities. Slowly but surely, Sharpe's media halo was dimming. Inside ESPN, there were even whispered discussions about succession plans. Not officially, of course. No one dared say it aloud yet. But contingency lists were being drawn up. Which guest hosts could fill gaps if Sharpe had to disappear temporarily? Which personalities could be elevated if advertisers started demanding a full rebrand? It wasn't betrayal, it was survival. At the same time, news about other celebrity lawsuits, involving much bigger names, started picking up steam. Legal analysts warned, if this becomes a pattern, if more high-profile civil suits keep landing against media figures, networks might start enforcing stricter morality clauses across the board. In other words, ESPN wasn't just fighting one fire. They were staring at a future where every scandal could cost millions instantly. Stephen A., knowing all of this, doubled down on one thing: transparency. Every time he spoke about the lawsuit, he made sure to remind viewers no one knows the full story yet. No verdict had been reached. Allegations weren't proof. Yet at the same time, he didn't dismiss the seriousness. He didn't minimize Jane Doe's claims. He walked that brutal middle line that very few media figures know how to balance without tipping over. And while the lawsuit churned forward, the cost wasn't just financial. It was emotional. Staffers who once considered Sharpe a mentor now struggled with how to even greet him in the hallway. Producers who built segments around his charisma now found themselves hedging bets, planning safer, blander discussions just in case. Meanwhile, online detectives kept digging. Public record requests started flying. People wanted security footage, incident reports, anything that could crack the case wide open. And although much of it was rumor and noise, the few verified leaks that slipped out only deepened the chaos. Every new detail reignited the fire. Every speculation became tomorrow's headline. By midweek, even neutral parties were feeling the strain. Journalists with no stake in the story reported feeling pressure to pick a side: Team Sharpe or Team Jane Doe. Commentators who tried to stay neutral got attacked from both directions. It wasn't just a lawsuit anymore, it was a tribal war. And that war was bleeding directly into ESPN's bottom line. Brand analysts began warning that even the whiff of scandal could shave millions off advertising revenue in a quarter. Sponsors were getting jumpy. Some insisted on inserting new clauses into upcoming deals. Others pulled scheduled campaigns quietly, opting for safer partnerships outside sports media altogether. And through it all, Stephen A. kept showing up, kept threading the impossible needle, kept carrying the weight of a show and a network, trying desperately to survive a storm that wasn't even fully here yet. Because deep down, he knew the worst wasn't over. It hadn't even started yet. Weeks passed, but the pressure never really eased. Every court update, every leaked document, every new social media theory kept the Shannon Sharpe lawsuit simmering just below full boil. Viewers who once tuned into First Take for fiery debates and playful rivalries now tuned in with a different energy, watching Stephen A.'s every move, listening for any subtle shift in tone, searching for any unspoken hint about where things were headed. And Stephen A.? He kept his posture straight, his voice steady, his commentary careful, but behind the scenes, even he wasn't immune to the emotional exhaustion piling up. There's a limit to how long you can walk a tightrope without slipping, a limit to how many times you can say, due process, before even your most loyal viewers start demanding something more definitive. But Stephen A. understood something the angriest voices online didn't. Real credibility isn't built by picking sides when the facts aren't all in. It's built by holding the line, even when holding it feels like standing in front of a tidal wave. And he wasn't just protecting his own reputation. He was protecting something much bigger. The idea that sports media could still be a place where facts mattered, where rushes to judgment didn't dictate careers overnight. Meanwhile, discovery motions started surfacing in court filings. Sharpe's team and Jane Doe's lawyers began fighting over access to records, emails, text messages, private communications, anything that could tip the scale. Settlement talks, according to insiders, had started quietly behind closed doors, not because either side wanted to admit defeat, but because the deeper into discovery you go, the messier things get. One wrong email, one bad text, one piece of security footage taken out of context. That's all it would take to destroy not just a lawsuit, but an entire public persona. And both sides knew it. Financially, the numbers being thrown around were staggering. Even if Sharpe fought and won, legal fees, PR damage, and lost sponsorships could bleed him for years. If he lost, the $50 million wasn't the end of it. Settlements, damages, and future brand rejections could haunt him long after the courtroom emptied out. For ESPN, the risks weren't any smaller. If they stuck by Sharpe too long and he fell, they looked complicit. If they dumped him too early and he cleared his name, they looked cowardly. It was a lose-lose, and every executive in the building knew it. And yet, through all of it, Stephen A. refused to abandon two key points: respect due process and acknowledge the seriousness of the accusations. It wasn't about playing it safe. It was about playing it right. And that's something social media outrage cycles rarely have patience for. Outside the studio walls, Shannon Sharpe's brand was already changing. Instagram engagement slipped, corporate invitations dried up, private whispers grew louder. Networks that once fought for a piece of Sharpe's charisma now quietly discussed whether he was too risky to touch. Even if he survived legally, he would still have to fight a much bigger battle, rebuilding trust. Meanwhile, the woman at the center of the lawsuit, still known only as Jane Doe, remained silent, communicating only through legal filings. Advocates praised her for protecting her privacy. Skeptics criticized her for not speaking publicly. But the truth was, the courtroom wasn't the only place this battle was being fought. It was being fought in headlines, in hashtags, in TikTok theories, and Twitter threads. And that's what made it even more dangerous for everyone involved. Because in the court of public opinion, facts aren't weighed carefully. They're weaponized instantly. Stephen A. knew it. The executives knew it. Even Sharpe's most loyal defenders knew it. That's why, no matter how many careful statements were made, no matter how cautious the on-air commentary became, the damage was already there, baked into the headlines, etched into the comments, stitched into the narrative. And that narrative wouldn't just fade quietly away. It would resurface with every court hearing, every motion filed, every update leaked. Months from now, even years from now, people would still remember that at one point, Shannon Sharpe's name wasn't attached to a Hall of Fame bust or a viral debate clip. It was attached to a $50 million lawsuit. Stephen A., for all his measured commentary, understood that too. In one particularly telling moment, he reminded viewers, justice is slow, facts take time. And patience isn't just a virtue. It's a necessity if you want to get the story right, not just loud. It wasn't the kind of line that goes viral. It wasn't the kind of line that wins instant applause. But it was the kind of line that might just survive when the noise fades and only the truth remains. Because in the end, that's what this whole saga really boiled down to. Not just about one lawsuit, or one celebrity, or even one network. It was about whether a culture obsessed with speed could still find the patience to get things right. And Stephen A. Smith, whether praised or criticized, had decided exactly where he stood. Right in the middle of the storm. Calm, steady, waiting for the facts. Even when it would have been so much easier to just pick a side and scream. If you enjoyed watching, you're not going to want to miss it, so don't forget to like and subscribe.